The Town of Washington Millbrook Historical Society meeting on Thursday the 13th of April in the year 2000, and our topic for the meeting tonight is a nostalgic look at Hogan's Alley.
I have all the pictures you like to share. But can you stand on a computer and turn and the Historical Society to have a collection? Keeps on days when we have our when the library has a local history room. I'm going to turn. Oh no, we have a little bit of business. Allison Meyer, let me just go.
Well, I just wanted to
because you're really the program. My job is an easy one. The teacher in me likes working with groups, so I'm going to play teacher. But tonight's really show and tell. It's your stories, your remembrances, your insights about this extraordinary street that we've nicknamed Hogan's Alley. Before we start talking about the street, though, let me give you a little bit of background about the name. The Historical Society has spent several days researching maps, the census reports for the area, coming up with names of people who actually lived on Alden Place in the 1900 census. When you think of that, that was 100 years ago. That listing is actually in the parlor, and some of you were looking at it before. Names that we all know, Ratuno, of course, is there, Ball, lots of names that have significance to people in the audience. But what about Hogan? Let me give you the background on that. Some of you know, some of you don't. Yes, there was a Hogan living on Alden Place in 1900. But that's not how it got its name. The street, originally part of a larger estate, was created shortly before 1900. And in 1900, there were about 8 houses. We counted them. We've got a map that you'll see already built. But it wasn't called Hogan's Alley. It was called Alden's Place. In 1897, an important event took place in daily newspapers, and it was called the Yellow Kid. Any of you know that name? The Yellow Kid. It was the first syndicated cartoon, and it was about a little Oriental boy with a long pigtail who was getting into mischief in San Francisco. And it was syndicated because at the time, people in California were afraid that Orientals would take over the city and the county and the state. And William Randolph Hearst had a cartoon syndicated about the young child called the Yellow Kid. And overnight, ethnic and racial cartoons took off. Now, you may not remember the Yellow Kid, but you may remember some other ethnic types that in the 1890s were so popular that all of America was buying papers, not for the news, but because of the funnies. And it started a little over 100 years ago. Let me give you some of the names. You may remember them. They started off as ethnic stereotypes. Here's another set for you. The Cats and Jammer Kids. Remember them? Remember their nationality? They were German, and they spoke with a very funny accent, just like vaudeville, another ethnic type. The original creators of that left the Hearst paper, and he kept the name, so some of you know it as the Captain and the Kids, because Cats and Jammer actually, Hearst kept the name on. Here are some others that were generated at the same time. Moon Mullins, Little Orphan Annie, Gasoline Alley, all of them showing ethnic types that dealt with life right from the teens through the 1930s and 40s. But here's the one that's important for us. The comic strip was known as Happy Hooligan. Okay? Where was Happy Hooligan from? Anyone know? Ireland. And guess where he lived? Hogan's Alley. Alden Place started off not as an Italian neighborhood, but as an Irish neighborhood. Those first houses were all built by Irish families, many of them who had come in the 1860s and 1870s. We have records of that. A few of them opened boarding houses. And in 1897, one of the first boarding houses on the street catered to Italians. And I have a clipping somewhere. I probably lost it. The teacher in oh, no, here it is. No, that's a bill. It has both from here. Here we go. 1897. This is in the Millbrook Roundtable. The byline. Returning to Italy. Laborers by the thousands return to their families and friends. During the past few weeks, this is December 4th, by the way, 1898. During the last few weeks, many natives of sunny Italy living in this vicinity have gone back to their former homes, some for a short sojourn and some forever. The greater number have not gone to their fatherland to abide there the rest of their lives, but rather to bring back with them their wives and children that they left behind when they embarked for America in search of a living and to avoid oppression. Many of the reasons for the return of so many laborers from thereabouts and from all parts of that country. As is well known here, there is much less outdoor work done during the winter months than during the rest of the year, and this fact is responsible for much of the emigration. They can better take this part of the year off to bring their families here or to go home to see the loved ones left in the land of their birth. A banker who personally attends to the embarking of most of those returning Italians, can you guess the banker's name? You'll find out. Hasn't changed much. And who goes to New York 2 or 3 times a week with parties of them, says he's had some difficulty in finding room for those booking passage. In the early part of the spring, the banker expects an overwhelming number of them to return with their families. The name was Donaldson, and the associate was Whalen. So this goes right back 100 years ago, Donaldson. And that's the library, right next to the library. So what was happening in the 1890s, a lot of Italian immigrants were coming here and they started off in boarding houses. They're called tenements on the map that you'll see. And the list of each of those houses is located in the 1900 census. So from 1900, when most of the names on that block were Irish names, to 1910, when most of the names were Italian, we have a change. Hogan's Alley stuck, not because of the Italians, but because the street was first Irish, and it's been given that name, Hogan's Alley, informally ever since. We know today, though, was the associations for many, many people as the real heart of our Italian neighborhood. Was it the only one? No, of course not. But part of the nostalgia that we all face and look at walking down that street are the associations. And one of the honorary members of that fraternity, the Italian fraternity, we all know as Henrietta Willis. And I have to tell you one story, and then I'm going to turn it over for you with stories. For those of you who remember the Willis family, the Willis family originally were part of San Donoma, and they were house servants in San Donoma, but they lived on right next to, actually, before the road was built, they lived across the street where the Methodist church is. That was the original Willis family. And very shortly they moved onto the street itself. Henrietta Willis grew up with many of you, and because it was such an Italian neighborhood, Henrietta Willis spoke passing fair Italian, as you know. And the story that I love is the recollection that had come down. She worked for Lucky Pratt in Poughkeepsie, and she was in control of the elevator. And one day, two Italian ladies, matrons, some of you know the story, got onto the elevator and started chattering away in Italian. Henrietta didn't say anything. And went from one floor to another, until finally the ladies got to the main floor and got off the elevator to leave. And she wished them a good day in perfect Italian. They turned around and then she continued talking to them. And they were mortified, mortified with what they had said and she had heard. But enough of that. That's one story from Hogan's Alley, so it's really collected. Let's have some others. I've started it off, so hopefully I've broken the ice. But there are so many other great stories. Someone jump in.
Okay, I just want to, before I start, I would just like to tell everyone how much I've enjoyed talking with you all. I think if I had been able to tape record all my telephone conversations, we could have 2 hours here tonight just listening to telephone conversations. And the little bits and pieces I picked up was fantastic. Tom, there you are. He was one of the first people I talked with, and Tom went on and told me all about the houses on Hogan's Alley. And then I, in turn, talked with Tom, and then Tom volunteered to draw the map. And then I'd come out of church, and Tom Fiore come over to me and say, "Oh, Ella Marie," he said, "I thought of somebody else. Now you should contact this person, you should contact that person." And so this is the way this whole evening has gone, with one person telling me to contact someone else, and with Tom Fiore drawing the map and labeling all the homes on it. And he told me in the beginning, he said, now this is from 1940 on to about 1955 when I was growing up. He said, I know there were people there before that, but I don't remember who they were because I wasn't living on Hogan's Alley. So then I talked with Tess. Where's Tess? Okay, here. And then she said, well, she knew, a lot of them, and they would come tonight and help fill in the part that Tom didn't know about. So I just wanted to thank all of you because it's been a very enjoyable experience for me talking on the telephone with all of you. Tonight, if any of you do have names, corrections, or additions to the photographs, and Angie already identified her dad, which was great. It was a picture we didn't know who that was. So if you wouldn't mind tonight looking, and if you see any names that should be corrected or additions should be made, please do it. And on the houses, if there are any additions or changes, please make note of that, because that's what they're there for. Let's see. I did want to thank the people who won their photographs, but Ginny has already done that, so I don't have to do that. Tess, you mentioned about the house that I always thought was the Manzi house. Now, was that originally your dad's home? It was. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Or Charlotte?
I don't know too much about it in the early days, but I know that my father put a down payment on that house in 1902. And then they had to do some renovations, and they built a third story, 2 rooms up above the house. And that's where my mother came to this country and lived in it. Before, when she first came to this country, my father lived in the house that Dora was called up in. And that's the way whose house was that. I don't know who owned that. That I recall was a man that owned the house, but he wouldn't sell it. And the Balone family, the Balone family lived in there. And Balone and Safari, they were one family, brothers and sisters and all that. And we lived next door to them. And in 1907, we moved into our house. That's the Manzi house. And we lived in that house until 1923, when the Manzis took it over. And when the Manzis took that over, we moved up on Maple Avenue. My father built the house on Maple Avenue. This is what I can tell you. It was a great house. We had a lot of fun in there. My mother had boarders.
She did have boarders.
There were 11 of us in the family. And in those days, the boarders would sleep in cots. They would have 2 or 3 cots in one room. They had a main kitchen where the men would come home from work and cook a little supper for themselves. My mother didn't cook the supper. They did it themselves. They had the use of the kitchen. And if I'm not mistaken, they paid something like $15, $20 a month for the use of being able to sleep in there. And that went on until my mother did that. At the same time, she was bringing, every 2 years, she had another child. And until Teddy was born, she was the last one born in that house. I don't know what else I can tell you about it, but it was a great old house and we loved it. And we loved our neighbors. We were real neighbors, not like we are today. We don't know our neighbors today. But we shared everything with the Safaris and the Balloons. The house next door to us belonged to a family by the name of McLaughlin. They worked with the Wing family. Rod McLaughlin, Mary Sackett was one. Rod McLaughlin brought her up. And they were another great family. It was a big family. And with our family, the Safaris and McLaughlins were one whole family. And the Willises. And the Willises. And the Willises. Well, they came in later. They came in with, as far as we were concerned. And then there was next door. Then I think when the McLaughlins went out, there was a family that came in by the name of Santa Pedro. And that was another good-sized family. I think when the Santa Pedro went out, Rosemary DeSantis' father and mother went in there.
Which house was that?
The house next door to the Manzi house.
Oh, Manzi, my grandmother.
Your grandmother.
Right, yeah,
and
grandmother, right.
That was way back.
Yeah, that was years ago.
That was years ago.
Right.
You know what would be fun? Let's just have a show of hands of anyone in the audience tonight who was born on Alden Place.
I was born.
Maybe they should stand up. Stand up. That's fantastic. Wow, look at it. All right. That's a great house.
Still live there. Yes.
No, look,
Okay, that's great. What we're going to be doing at the end, actually, we're going to get some of those photographs because we want to put them in the paper. So at the very end, we'll get a group shot of everyone who was born on the avenue or lived on the avenue and those who still do. It'll be interesting in the paper, and that's just to provide it. But I have to do one thing else. That is, how many people are married to people who were born on the avenue or lived on the avenue? If you're in the audience, stand up. Because you deserve a show of hands too.
Tess told me about Catherine. And Catherine's finger got struck by lightning. And I understand you still have the scar, Kathy. Can you explain that a little bit to us? And who was with you when that happened?
That was in the Manzi house?
Yeah, and the great and she was up there with, of course. She was up there when she got struck near that window with Henrietta's brother, Smoke Willis. We all went down the block. She got struck.
And why were you doing that? You got struck by lightning?
The oldest one. I went because I was following the boys. I went to my mother said, go shut the windows. So I went up.
Oh, okay. Your mother asked you to all go shut the windows, and the Willis boys were with you?
Well, my mother was scared to death of lightning.
Okay. And you got struck by lightning? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Tom, I have a question for you. Now, you were so nice in drawing that map, but you were like the gatekeeper of Hogan's Alley, from what I understand. What was the responsibility of the gatekeeper of Hogan's Alley?
Had to go by Tom
You
first.
had to go by Tom first?
Actually, I lived on Church Street. The front of the house faced Church Street. I was considered the gatekeeper.
Okay, you were considered the gatekeeper. And you mentioned to me when you drew that lovely map, you have some grapevines in there, or arbors? And,
Sam Fiore's father and Tom Fiore's father had a driveway that was way down to the back to the garage. And also, I think, the Martinis. And it was just like a tunnel. You probably walk in the rain not get wet.
really, it was that,
And also, Manzi's, as I remember when I grew up, had a beautiful grapevine back at the restaurant.
okay.
And my grandmother and grandfather, next to the grape shade, they had a great big arbor there with all the grape. We used to sit up there.
Now, is that how the grape shade got its name? From the shade of the grapevine? Okay. Very good. And then another thing that Tom pointed out to me, it's about where I think the Church Alliance apartments are now. There was a pond there, Tom, you said, and there are picnic tables.
Well, no, there was like a picnic, what do you call it, pavilion.
Oh, okay.
And small ponds, I remember growing up. Pavilion.
So you could go up there and have picnics and...
Well, I think they did. I left that before I grew up.
Oh, okay. There was a pavilion so you could go up and have picnics, and was the pond big enough to swim in, or just fishing, or just a mud pond? Yeah. Okay. I was talking with Marion Bennett early on, and Marion told me, if I remember correctly, that you were born in Stanfordville, was it, Marion? Okay, but you moved to Hogan's Alley when?
I didn't really. My husband was from Alden Place,
Okay.
and we didn't live there till we lived in the apartment where Angie Jack was for a few years in the 1960s.
Okay.
But my experience when my aunt and uncle lived on Alden Place, the Scott family, and yeah, and wrote back up, yeah. And my impression, when I came from Stanfordville and I never smelled garlic or tomato sauce or anything like that. And I visit my aunt and uncle and I just didn't know what the smell was. And the other thing I remember are all the grapevines, and because up in, you had a grape arbor. Yeah. And everybody, and the Masserones lived there, and made wine. Everybody used to make wine. Yeah. And you'd hear all the Italian men talking and speaking Italian every night. We'd be out there. That was strange, coming from Stanfordville.
All the way from Stanfordville. All the way from Stanfordville. John Panazzo, every time I speak with someone, they say they remember going to would it be your grandfather's store?
Yes, my grandmother had a store right across from the mall.
Okay, and that's where the lawyer is now, is it? And that was an Italian grocery store, was it, or?
There were two. On the corner, and then above, and a grocery store as well.
Okay. And people have, I wish Paul Galley said he had another meeting tonight, but if he was finished, he and Kathy were going to come, but he said he remembers as a little boy going up to visit his grandmother, who lived on Hogan's Alley.
Yeah, she lived right next to it. That was my grandmother.
Oh, okay. See, I'm learning something again now tonight again.
Yeah, we're all related one way or another.
And he said he can remember going in and seeing the big, sausages hanging and and all the shows were stacked with macaroni and pasta. Yeah, and he said the smell was wonderful, yeah. Yeah. Provolone cheese? Yeah, very good.
We didn't call it garlic then, we called it Italian butcher's.
You mentioned about playing games in the streets.
Oh, yeah, we used to lamp.
We had about 40 children around our own age, so we never had to go off the street. We played all sorts of games. And then, during the war years, all these Italian men had victory gardens. And there were no lawns. It was all these victory gardens. And we used to go and steal. It was amazing. And then one thing I want to tell you is that when the Italians came over, they did bring some of the religious traditions here. Now on Hogan Place, my mom always told me for the Feast of St. Roch, when it was your father, 16, they used to go down church and have a mass there and carry the statue of St. Roch up the streets of Hogan Place and place it in the center of the street. And people would come and put dollar bills and all that. And besides that, they used to have all these different booths with all this Italian cooking. And people would come from all over, from Europe, and they would partake in the food, and we had dancing, and they wanted walk, they would have fireworks. And fireworks.
That was a new, that was Angie, that was. That was Assunta and Vincent DeRusso. They lived, that started that. He would get the thing and he.
Until today, I'm still collecting money to have a mass.
Yeah, they always collect money for St. Roch.
He used to be. Yeah. The one that used at the pharmacy?
It was his father.
Was his father?
His father, Gus Aridi.
He was a shoemaker.
He was a shoemaker.
And he made the,
My father, that Sue has now.
okay. Very good, thank you. Let's see, Vinny, you mentioned to me, and I think Millie did too, when I spoke with you, you mentioned about going up to Hogan's Alley because you could speak Italian with the Italian people, and now since...
They all passed away.
Yeah.
The last one was Mrs. Colonello, and I'm sorry, she passed away. That was the last person I spoke Italian with, and now I forget certain words because I have no one to speak Italian with.
Yeah. And I think with you and Millie also mentioned about the St. Roch Festival.
Yeah, also I want to mention the St. Roch's Festival. They built an altar up a part, and we had and Laura's sister here used to be Panazzo. Laura and I used to get the broom and sweep the whole street so that it would be clean for people to dance, you know, and we did that all the time, every year.
And one thing for the newcomers, you know, now Alden goes all the way up to the high school. Back then it didn't. It ended right after, about after your houses, or wasn't it, Angie? Yeah, yeah. So there was a dead end, so they could do things like this. There wasn't any traffic up there. Because after that was the winter state. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, a lot of these Italian women didn't even have to go off the street to buy stuff, because once a week the grocery stuff, the fish man would come. Right, and the rag man would come, and the tin man, and the ice man.
The Iceman lived there. He didn't even have to come.
Before that, the newspapers used to come up and take the orders on a Monday morning. On Wednesday morning, they delivered. My mother never went shopping.
Shopping, yeah. Wonderful. But Tom and Sam, your dad were the Iceman, right? Could you tell us a little bit about, did you work in... Did you and Sam go with your dad then to deliver the ice, or did you and Sam go with your dad to deliver ice, or? Pardon me? I'm sorry, LaRose? Oh, you were playing in the street. Okay. Okay.
I can tell you from
Yes, Gert, please do.
I worked for Mr. Birch years ago. I was there after my father died. And we just worked in the store. We sold everything. From
Now, Mr. Birch owned what store?
It works the village department
Okay,
store.
okay.
And we sold everything from pins to oil for your car or gasoline or whatever you want. Lace, baby clothes, you name it, we had. And this very sweet girl had a baby thing in one day. And she had 2 sticks. One this long about, and one that long. And she's talking to me in Italian. I could barely speak English. And we chatted, and I pointed to this, and I pointed to that. And after a long time, I discovered she wanted a pane of glass. That was one of the other things she said. So I took her upstairs, and yes, I showed her, yes, that's what she wanted. So I had to go down to get Mr. Birch to come up to color it, you know, with big chewy glass and the color, because I had a glass color. It looked like a little screwdriver with a little wheel in it. So anyway, he did it. So when she went out, she was all up there already. When she went out, he said, "Bridget, how did you ever know?" And I said, "Oh, I know a lot of things." The dirtiest.
And I think you mentioned that story before, that,
This entailed about an hour's conversation.
and the 2 sticks, they represented the size that she wanted, I think. The 2 sticks that she had, did they represent the size of the piece of glass that she wanted?
No, I don't know how I just did it. It's just a lot.
Okay.
I go, what would she want that would be this long and this wide? I did get that from her.
Yeah, okay.
And then finally, it dawned on me she wanted the pane of glass.
Very
It was
good.
just a guess in the dark.
Yeah.
It worked out. But she was delighted. We had a lot of fun over it.
Yeah.
She was even laughing at me.
Dora, now you grew up close. Were you really on Hogan's Alley, or were you on Church Street?
Well, when I was very small, my family moved to New York. And then when we came back, my father bought
On Church Street. So you and Tom were sort of the gatekeepers, or the protectors of Hogan's Alley? Yeah. Tom Cardinal, you must have some funny stories to tell. Well, tell us one. Tell us one. Tell us one.
During the summer, the year that we did play softball, tennis ball, we did the ball in the sun. First base would be Gino Manucci, that would be the first base. Second base would be right in the middle of the street. Third base would be Mandy's, Simon Rowan, Mandy's on the left side. And then to have Mr. Fiore come up with his truck, and when he would go into the weather, he'd eat the ice cream there, you know, bang, bang, bang. That was our version of it. Sucking one of them pieces of ice in the middle of the summer. It's like having Carvel now.
Yeah.
Would not kill like you buy an eel. And she leaves the eel alive in the kitchen sink. And alive, so she knew that my father would be home at 4:30, so she knew when, and with my brother Norman and I's job to go down and skin an eel. And that was very difficult. You have to get a hammer and put it down. But anyway, that's what she was doing. About 3:30, 4, I remember. But I think it was something about the story about the name of Hogan's Alley. My interpretation of the story I heard was that they had a meeting, all the Italian men had a meeting under the grape shade one Sunday afternoon. This is before they were going to play tennis. Before. So we were all talking to each other then. what about Mandy? She got, a lot of family. No, it's Malala, because they have 15, I guess. And if you know it, back and forth. Kara's on, if he was living there, he would want him down. But anyway, they said, then one guy got up and look, let's be like the Americans. This was all said in time. Let's be like the Americans. Let's leave it at home. And everybody lifted it.
Very good. Bert, now you were born up on Hogan's Alley, were you? Can you remember anything as a child to add to the conversation with me?
I moved out when I was about 7 years old. That's 8 years old. But my mother always told me that when Louis was born in 1950, that he was born in the doctor charged $5. Now I was born 2 years later, 1917, and the fees doubled. So some of these young people today realize how much.
Yeah. So that the doctor came to the house to deliver the baby. He had to come from Armenia. Oh, okay.
And that's another story that I heard that is so charming, and it has to do when your mother and father were married, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was it an uncle of yours who borrowed a car for the wedding? And when the car was brought back to the house, first time he'd driven the car, he pulled in the driveway and he went, "Whoa!" And the car went right through the garage.
Let's see, where's the, yes, Joe.
1984, we had a baseball team called Hogan's Alley Wagons. And during the war, World War II, approximately 40 guys from that street made the service in the Army and the Navy, and 2 of them come back. One Mazzarella and Charlie Moore. A number of GIs from out of the street.
Now, does anybody here remember the baseball team at all, or play? Oh, okay, Tommy. Can you tell us a little bit about the baseball team?
We had over the years, we had a pretty good team. We used to go down and play the front street. That was a big rival. Buddy Maroda and those guys, Tommy was our pitcher. Good stick man, too.
There was also the bowling league, which Ernie Safari and the Safaris were all involved in for 10, 15 years. At the bowling alley.
There was a third.
There were actually 3 boys from Hogan's Alley that didn't come back from the war. Yeah.
Mazzarella. I got to tell you one story about November 4th, 1931, a big year for me, the year I was born. Malala's house upstairs. Dr. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Dr. McKinney came up, delivered me, I think. Packed his bag and heading down the stairs. They called him back. Doc, come back, there's another one coming out. 2 was reported. I got to one more story about Henrietta. You mentioned Henrietta before. The fuel store. She was down at Poughkeepsie, down at Mount Carmel store down there, buying bread. The guy behind the counter says, "Give that lady yesterday's stale bread," in Italian. So she lit up into that guy. Every Italian word that's a swear word, she used.
Very good, thank you. Where's Andy? Here. Andy, can you were telling me about, the restaurant that your parents started, the Grape Shade. Can you tell everybody here about that? When your family started it, now it wasn't a restaurant when Rotunno's owned it. No. Okay. So your family were the ones that started the Grape Shade?
Back in 31.
Okay. Now, did they start it as a restaurant, or did they just start it to... More of a town, oh, okay. Was it, would it possibly have been to, like, feed the, you know, the boarders that were living there at the time, or? No, it was just like a social place. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, those clam bakes were fabulous.
A clam bake?
Yeah. Under the grape arbor there, oh, they were good.
Yeah.
We're talking about next meeting being on businesses. I think it'd make a very interesting talk just to listen to how the grape shake got started.
Yeah, it would
They
be.
had a very, very high on the list, of very outstanding.
Uh-huh.
In all the years that I knew that I was growing up, and a lot of us were, and I think it'd make a very nice, interesting talk. Next week.
It started off as what, Andy? An Italian grocery store? Uh-huh. Very good.
Homemade sausage, yeah, they have their sausage, they hang them there drying.
And I used to go here, my mother was making bread, and she says, Angie, here's a nickel, go to Mother-Lee's and get 5 cents worth of yeast. That's how she used to put about 5 cents worth of yeast in a little wax thing. But I would go home as I was going, but something she gave me a nice hump for 5 cents.
My mother used to give me 35 cents and say, time to put down the sugar hicks. 35 cents, soup me and mug. He always leave a little bit of meat on there. Not much, but he left enough. We would have to big.
Now, where was that store, Tom? That was on Main Street. Was that Charlie Tripp's,
And he knew exactly how much to weigh.
Yeah. Now, that would have been Charlie Tripp's uncle's store or father's, brother's? Charlie Tripp's father's store. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Angie, I just wanted you to know that I was very jealous of all you guys up there at Hogan's because I had to walk all the way up from Front Street to have any fun. We lived on Front Street, and I had to go all the way up there. And you think it's easy to drag a sled that far? Does anybody remember sleigh riding down Church Hill? Yes, yes, at night we would sleigh down Church Hill.
Now, when you say Churchill, what Churchill was that? It was where? By the old, where the old used to be the Methodist church there on Church? Yeah.
It's a very big hill, but to me, I like Mount Everest.
Yeah. Very good. What, Tom?
Our skis are broken down wine barrels.
Yeah, right.
All have to throw them out. Strap them right on
Yeah.
Olive oil can.
The olive oil can on each foot? Yes, Angie. Wait, could everybody quiet down just a little bit because we can't hear? Okay.
If you walked up on Alden Place in the fall, the smells of the winemaking in the cellars. My dad used to make wine and apple cider, and my mom used to make root beer, plus all the candies. And they used to send us down to the cellar to get the root beer as we would pop and go up in it. Oh, what nice smells. And you could see the people delivering all these cases of red grapes, white grapes, and they would come from across the river. Oh,
Yes, I'm sorry. From Highland? Huge trucks. Grapes from Highland? Yeah.
tasting the wine.
had their own recipe.
And you would go around from house to house tasting the wine?
I never forget when I graduated in 1948, and then we went to my house, and my father was still making wine, and some of the guys got down cellar, and they were drinking the wine from the barrel.
Yes. We have a question here. Did they make wine during Prohibition? Before, during, and after. Your answer is before, during, and after Prohibition. Yes. Can we just quiet down a little bit again, please? Helen wants to say something here.
I remember being in school and most of the kids came from Hogan's place, Hogan's Alley. But there was one boy, his name was Johnny Magnorella. And he had, I don't know whether he had polo, but he couldn't walk and he had braces on his feet. And I remember any kid up there would carry him wherever they went. He was always carried by somebody. And I know my brother-in-law Gail remembers that. That's one thing he told me to say, remember that, Johnny Magnorella, how he used to carry him around.
Now, was that Millie? Was that your brother? That was your brother?
But he belonged to the baseball team. He was Haywood Pitt, and either Buddy Verona or Gil Russell would run for him. So he was into everything. The kids were all great.
And they all used to pitch in together, help one another.
Wonderful. You know, the other day I saw John Morona in downtown, and I mentioned the meeting, and he said, well, I don't think I can come because Thursday's my day off. And I said, well, but it's at night. And he said, yeah, but I don't usually like to come home early for my day off. And I said, well, if you can come, we'd love to have you. And he said, well, I have a lot of stories. So tell us some stories, John.
Well, I'll tell you, most of the stories have been covered that I knew by people that lived there. But my grandfather and grandmother on my mother's side came from Italy. And my grandfather came in 1898 to the United States and got a job and built his own house. And he went back to Italy and got my grandmother. 28 days on a boat. Probably the bottom of the damn thing to come from Italy. But they never went back.
Where did they build a house, John?
They built a house. Their first house was down next to where the sewer system is now. There was no sewer system there now. They eventually tore it down. And he bought the house that belonged to the Haight family on Front Street. Well, see, my father was a stonemason brought over here from Italy by the Dietrich estate to do a lot of that stone. And my grandfather never lived in Hogan's Alley. They were a little high class. They lived down.
Very good. Thank you.
That's about all I can do. Everybody covered everything else that I was going to say, except one thing. Hogan's Alley was noted in those days as being a tough part of town.
A tough part of town?
Tough part. And you didn't want to go up there and start any trouble. So the Irish, some of the Irish were still living there, and most of the Italians. So when they got in the wine and the beer, they got in a lot of fights. So the village board was trying for years to get a cop to go up there and calm it down. So they finally found this old Italian guy, Tony Giacomo, and he had hurt. My mother told me he had hurt in a construction accident, and he lost 3 fingers. So we used to call him Tony Majoc, the 2-finger cop. When he kept law and order in Hogan's Alley.
Very good, thank you. Lou Marone, now, did you always live on Front Street? Did you live on Hogan's Alley originally? Or?
Yes.
But did you live on Hogan's Alley, or you did? You grew up on Hogan's Alley, okay. And then you moved all the way down to Front Street. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm so sorry.
Story about it. And this boy got in a fight, my sister did. And Mary hit the boy, I think his name was Pastra.
Yeah.
And hit the boy, and she did fracture his head. Her grandmother came over to my mother, and she yipped and yelled, and she was going to do something about it because Mary hurt her boy. But after that, they became the best of friends, Mrs. Piacentino and my mother, and Bert's mother was the one that did the damage. That was a long, long time ago.
That's all my stories.
Yeah, that's, no.
Everybody else covered this. I never lived on Alden Place. You heard from firsthand the people that lived there.
But you could go up and visit.
Oh, we went to play baseball.
Okay.
We played on the street. We never broke any windows, we only had a tennis ball. There was no cars going through.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, like Tommy said, somebody's house was first base and second base was in the middle of the street and somebody else's third base.
Yeah. Very good.
And their sliding home plate was all McAdam.
Dick Seppi, you let Ginny borrow a lot of photographs. Could you tell us where you got those from?
Those came from my uncle Louis Nardone, who lived in Hogans, history and story.
Okay.
So there's no feeling.
Yeah?
Louis worked for me many years, and he's always taking pictures of the street. And a year ago at Christmas, he called me from Florida. I hadn't heard from him for over 20 years. He said he had all these photographs, matched and all like that. So he sent it to me.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing them with us. That's great.
Carmine Nardone was our uncle. My mother and Carmine were brother and sister.
Oh, really? Yeah. He spoke to us. Okay. Yes.
Before we leave, Dick Seppi was telling me about going over to Dietrich's dam to swim. And I'm wondering what else the guys did. They couldn't have stayed on that one short street. Where else the guys went for dangerous fun? The gorge? The Dietrich's? Whereabouts? Railroad?
Where'd we go for fun?
She said that you talked about going over to Diedrich's Lake to swim? Ice skate in the winter and swim in the summer? Did Mr. Diedrich permit you, or did you just snuck on? No, no one cared. No one cared.
We used to have the farm up on the back of the street there. We used to have the horses roam around, the work horses. We used to call those horses. We get on the fence, they get on their back, and we drive them all over that farm. That's where the central school is now. Where the central school is now.
Oh, where the central school is now? Yeah. Okay, so you're talking about the wing estate with the horses. Okay.
That was all swamp between.
Yeah.
School is at the bottom of the hill. That was all swamp. We used to build shacks up there. We used to hang out there all the time.
That's a big boy shack indeed. Big guys had the night, we had the little one on the side.
We had all our activities during that street.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. There's a movie house? Wait a second, everyone. Tom Malali just told me there was a movie house.
No, I was going to say, she was asking
Oh.
where Miller's Agway.
Oh, okay.
That was a movie house. That was a movie
Yeah, Miller's Alley was a, yeah. I thought you meant there was one on Hogan's Alley. I thought, now that's a story I haven't heard.
Tommy.
Bars, and there were two groceries that were plazas and ranches. Fantastic food. They used to come from all over the country. Quite a small street. Yeah, and they Mr. Milway, he was a policeman. The only policeman we had in Millway. And he'd go down the street and he'd say to the kid that lived down the street, somebody turned over somebody's back house. And those kids up in the alley. All the kids are all making wine. Never got any trouble.
I understand there was there a men's social club there, Italian American club?
Yes.
Can somebody explain that?
The one that's in the paper, the picture. Father Rock.
Oh, the picture, the house where Angie lives now?
Down below.
And there was an Italian American or a men's social club? So there was that, and then there was also the Grape Shade. Yeah. Pardon me? Now, Tony, yes. Oh, Anna sent this? Oh, the DeFazio property? Okay.
That was where the Italian American Club was.
Oh, okay.
Upstairs.
Okay, I'm going to let you read this to us if you don't mind.
Mind at all.
Now, Anna DeFazio is Dora's older sister, and she's improving, but she's been in the hospital, but she wrote this up, so this is great to have. And she was Safari, Anna Safari DeFazio. Okay.
This is what it says. Time frame around 1897 to early 1900s. Alden Place. DeFazio property, rear building, first floor of a two-story building. Raymond DeFazio, owner, baker, and it housed ovens. The woman would mix their bread dough, and he would cook the bread in the ovens. My grandfather moved the bakery to Franklin Avenue. When the building was vacated, the second floor became the Italian Society. The first floor housed the Italian Club for younger men. Raymond and Nicolina DeFazio and son James resided in the front building, now a one-family structure, and took in immigrants. One room housed a grocery store for Hogan's Alley. The stone structure has always been a multiple dwelling. My paternal grandfather, Raymond DeFazio, built and owned the dwelling. The house in front, which currently is directly across from the former Nazarene Manzi building, was a four-story family residence built and owned by Raymond DeFazio. Nazarene Manzi bought the former Ratuna home and opened a grocery store because my grandfather, Raymond DeFazio, gave up the one that he had had. The building across from the Ratuna house, the former Shar, okay, was owned by a Mr. Butts and rented by my maternal grandparents, Henry and Clara Safari, and housed two families, the second of which was the Ballone family. At a later time, the Safaris took over the entire house.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dora. Thank you.
It's really important, by the way, as we're talking and having a wonderful time reminiscing. If you have photographs of your family in any of those buildings, of playing ball in the streets, of baking bread, whatever it may be, those are the kinds of things that we as the society want to be able to copy and document. It's so fast and so quick that these things can be lost. And we remember now the stories, but think in another 100 years, when people come back, who's going to be around to remember them? So the legacy that you have is something that really needs to be preserved. The fourth grade history program in New York State focuses on local history. And as more and more children look to the history of this community, more and more of us won't be around to share it. So please, take the time. If you have photographs, we'll copy them, get them back to you. And as a historian, let me say something else. Please, take the time to write the names of the people on your photographs. At the Dutchess County Historical Society, where I volunteer, you wouldn't believe the number of things that were given to the society early on, 1914, and they were very good about their work. So please take the time to do that. And then take a little more time, give us a call, share those photographs, we'll copy them for you. So that's my pitch for tonight for the society.
Thank you. I did want to talk to Tony, because I was talking to you, Tony, about living on Hogan's Alley, and I think you said that you were either born there or you came from Italy, or?
Yeah, I came over in 1930.
You were born in what part of Italy?
Fundy.
In Fundy?
Where most Italians from here, you know.
Right, right.
But my mother, my father was over here. He went back and forth about 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And when we came in 1930, with my mother, was myself, I was 9 years old. My brother Joe was 3 years old, and my brother Gino was 9 months old.
Mm.
So it was pretty rough for my mother,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And
now your mother came over alone because your dad was already here?
I'm sorry?
Your mother came over alone with the 3 of you because your dad was already here?
Right. Oh, sure, yeah. And then when we came up...
Your father probably boarded with my mother. Your father probably lived in one of the rooms in our
Yeah,
house.
he boarded with
Right.
you
Your
people,
father
yeah.
did.
Yeah, he boarded with them.
Yeah.
And of course, when we came, he was living up the Hogan place, and we were coming up in the car, and with myself, I was 9, and see all these kids playing ball, you know. They were playing stick ball, of course, I didn't know what it was. But it was quite a ordeal. And then my brother, Gino, he was 9 months old, and soon after we left Ellis Island, he got a bunch of measles. So we were lucky that way there.
Yeah. You were in the country before he came down with the measles. Yeah.
Well, in 1902, when my mother came over with a 9-month-old baby, he got pneumonia on the ship. When the ships came in 1902, the people that were waiting for the families were allowed to go out in dinghies to meet the boat coming in. And one of my uncles came over with my mother and 4 children to be a chaperone and a help for my mother on the boat, taking care of the children. Little Andrew was 4 months old when he came to, 9 months old. And Pop had never seen him because Pop was here. And when the ship got near the dock in New York, the little dinkies went out to greet the boats coming in. And my uncle, that was on the big boat coming home from Italy, was so anxious for Pop to see the baby that he had never seen. This was in the month of March. And he took the baby out so my father could see the baby. The baby got home. 2 weeks after my mother arrived, the baby died of pneumonia. So that was the greeting that my mother had. And 2 years after that, 3 years after that, she wanted to go back to Italy. And the doctor said she had to go to New York in those days to get physical. And the doctor said, no, you can't go. Mom said, why not? Because you're pregnant and you're not going. So that was the story there.
How many children then did your mom have? I'm sorry?
That she had what you call it, Seppi's grandmother. Jenny Seppi's mother bought what little furniture my mother had accumulated in the 2 years that she was here when she decided she wanted to go back to Italy. And the little furniture she had, your grandmother bought. And when the doctor told Mom she couldn't go, she came back and your grandmother gave her back all the furniture.
Now, how many children then did your mom have?
Three boys in Italy. And Fanny was born here in the U.S.
Oh, okay.
4.
So you were 9 years old when you came. So you really grew up on Hogan's Alley. Yeah. Very good. Yes. Yeah, I was just trying to think, is anybody here that I've missed or any stories that were told to me that I
still have my grandfather's citizenship papers.
Do you really?
I have my grandfather's too.
Great.
And my grandfather came over in 1893.
1893. And what was his name?
His name was Domenico Seppi.
Domenico Seppi.
He came over a year after Ellis Island opened, so he was one of the first to come.
Wonderful.
$12. And I found the name of the ship that he came over. In fact, I found the entire passenger list.
Rosemary, why don't you stand up now?
This is the time to do it.
Just briefly tell how you've been able to
Okay.
family history that everyone should be right now.
Well, I think this is a curiosity that comes about when you start getting older, because you want to know where you came from, who was this person whose name you've heard a million times but you've never seen more than once. But obviously you have all of your public agencies, your town clerk, your village clerk, city hall of records if you live in the city. Any municipality has an office for a vital certificate. The deeds and the tax records yield a lot of information to people about the names of streets and who lived where and who owned the property. The churches, phenomenal, vast amounts of information about birth and baptism. If you're curious about who your godparents were, I didn't know who my godparents were. And so I got my baptismal certificate, and I still don't know who they were. And I've never heard of them before. But anyway, the libraries. The Adrian's Library, and I don't know, Virginia, have you talked about this before, the census records and so on?
No.
In the Adrian's Library, it doesn't cost a thing. You can go in, the material is very well organized. They have the census records going back 1890 and forward.
It's really helpful to go back to 1850, but for this group, 1890 turned out, so they start 1880, 1910, which probably is out there.
Okay, so you've got census records. You have the New York Public Library. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the New York Public Library, but there is information there. That, as a matter of fact, is the place where I found my grandfather's passenger list, the ship that he came in on. All of the passenger lists are there, those that are surviving, because there was a fire. And I can't tell you exactly what the date of that fire was, but many of the records were destroyed. But everyone whom I've looked up since I've been going there, I have found. So just hit it, luckily, hit the right years. So they have all the passenger lists, they have the census records, they have naturalization papers of people who have come over. The websites. How many people have actually begun looking for their family members? Anybody who has initiated this search? All right. If you're computer literate, and even if you aren't, this probably would be a good time to become computer literate. There are many websites on the computers that will allow you to find your relatives, find your family. One is for the Immigration and Naturalization Service. They won't actually give you the information about specific people. But what they will give you is the name of the roll of microfilm where you can find your grandfather or your great-grandfather. And that can become very useful because if you can go into the New York Public Library armed with that information, all you have to do is ask for the microfilm roll. And they have readers there and they'll help you. They're very, very helpful down there. And they know what they're talking about. Yes. I'm sorry?
How many families came from Ellis Island?
Well, anybody who came on the ship to Port of New York, so some come forward with Ellis Island, or else they went to Boston and then came down and went to Baltimore. 1892.
But Pittsfield, Massachusetts has the National Archives.
Yes,
All the
that's right.
census back in 1790 are there. And all, a lot of records from all the immigration records from all the ships from 1819 on. They also have naturalization papers from this whole area, the whole Northeast. They have the pension records from a lot of the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, all those up. They're all on index. They're all indexed, so you can go through all that.
Yes, well, the libraries are just full of this kind of information, and I think Ancestry.com. I don't know how many people have known about that. Ancestry.com. You can log on to that website and you can look up your surname. Now the thing is, you'll probably find your surname. And what is even more interesting is that there may be other people with your own surname that you don't even know who are also trying to find information about your family. So you're able to leave messages on that. You can actually type a message to people and they tell you where all the messages came from and you can communicate with those people. I just got over doing that for the Seppi and Nardone families. Now here's something that was very, very interesting. I don't know how many, is there anyone here who is a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints? Is there anyone here who's a Church of Latter-day Saints? The Church of Latter-day Saints has made it their mission to enumerate all of the people of the world. Because their founder, I believe was Joseph Smith, if I'm not mistaken, issued them a charge. And he said, first, go forth and make a record. And they took it seriously. Now, I don't know how they accumulate all this information. They actually send missionaries out to various parts of the world, and they sit there and they do all of this by candlelight and slate and chalk. I don't know. But the thing is, they do it. And once you get on that, you will find so much information about your family. I'm sure you all know my sister-in-law, Doreen Seven. Our Lady of Perpetual Food, you are. Well, some of her family came from France, and she showed me the information that one of her relatives had already accumulated on it. And I said, well, I'm going to research this a little further. Well, her earliest known relative I found on the Church of Latter-day Saints website goes back to 1513 in France. Now, you know, we didn't even have a settlement in the United States until 1607. So that's going back quite a ways. All right, so Church of Latter-day Saints, and you can download a lot of information from this particular website. In other words, if you've got your own CD, you can put it in, you can download the information, you can keep it permanently for yourself. Another thing for Italians, I want you to know that something that was very helpful for me was a book called Searching Your Italian Genealogical Records. You can get it through Barnes & Noble, you can order it on the internet, it's not very expensive, and that book is extremely helpful because if you are unfamiliar with Italian and you're not really good at, I mean, we're all not like email here. We don't all speak it fluently. But this book will give you actual letters that you can write to the various offices of what are called the Anagrafa and the Comune in Italy, and they will send you your family's records. So if you want more information about that, I can give you some more. Also watch the History Channel if you can. And if you have a computer, you can get on the History Channel website. They'll let you know how you can get tapes. There was one very popular called TOWNH in America. I don't know how many of you saw that. No? The other thing is, oh, I guess I told you everything. So now it's time for me to thank you.
Thank you.
We should have another meeting to continue on with this. There's a lot to be spent. Gertie.
That's right. Yes, Joe.
I brought this to take it on the Hogan Valley. There's four of us that just got out of service. And I got my name in the bag. Whose name's the other one?
Name of who's this?
That's Tony Masserone, Paul DeSantis, Norman Cardinal, and me. The name for that.
Now, can we borrow this and take it?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, that's your Isn't that? Now, what year was this taken?
1945 or 46.
1945.
You know who they are?
Well, let's see. Got my glasses. Are these people from the alley?
Yeah.
I'd just like to clarify a statement that I made in the beginning of the tape, on tape 1. In the very beginning, I mentioned 2 Toms, but I didn't give their last name. The first Tom that I mentioned was Tom Fiore, and it was Tom Fiore that I first spoke with and told me a great deal of all the people that lived in the different houses on Hogan's Alley. After that, I spoke with Tom Mullally, who also told me about the houses on Hogan's Alley and identified the residents of the houses. And it was Tom Mullally that drew the map indicating the houses and the people that lived in them. Thank you.